Hi, I'm Brenda Such. Welcome to COIPcast, where we talk about new, trending, or just fascinating technologies in online education. In this episode, we tackle giving feedback to students taking online courses in the arts. In a traditional arts course, the feedback is often an individual critique after a student showcases their work. But how does that process work with arts courses in an online environment? And how can it be sustainable with possibly more students in one class? Joining me today to enlighten how that process translates for online courses are instructors from the UF Digital Worlds Institute, Chelsea Cantrell and Aaron Karlson. Welcome, Chelsea and Aaron.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hello. Can you please take a moment to share about the courses you help to oversee at Digital Worlds?
I'm gonna let you start off with that one.
Yeah. So I oversee digital visualization, which is DIG 2121. I also teach Digital Production Studio 1, 2D animation principles, as well as 2D advanced, and I also teach digital portfolio. So those are the courses that I teach at Digital Worlds. They're mostly focused on graphic design, animation, visualization, just in the still image.
And Aaron?
Yeah, and so I teach the basic 3D, advanced 3D, character animation, senior project prep, and the senior project courses where students are going to make their capstone project before they graduate.
So do you all, between the two of you, see probably all the students at Digital Worlds at some point?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
She gets them when they first come in,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
she'll talk to me about them.
Yeah,
Like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah. 2121 is the introductory course. It's kind
Okay.
of like the sampler class. It's
Okay.
like they get an appetizer of all the different things that we do at the department, and then they go all the way through, and they have me at least once a semester until their very last semester in the senior project classes.
Okay, wow, so you get them all through. So our show has 3 segments where we'd like to get to know the past, present, and potentially future you for both of you. So we'll go through 3 segments: Digital Origin Story, Bits and Bytes, and Tech Forward, which will help us travel on this journey. It's kind of like a game, but but the first one will be Digital Origin Story, which is DOS. We gotta have a
Digital
little
origin story.
Digital Origin Story. So would you please share what your first memories were with online education?
I've actually been an online student since I was in high school. I did Florida Virtual School when I was a kid, and I also did some online classes in undergrad, and I did my entire master's degree online. So I have a lot of experience as a student and from the student perspective. And I started teaching the online courses here at Digital Worlds, which I think being a student in the online space really helped me to understand what that experience was like. So understanding how much communication is important, how much, just the saturation of information in different ways of delivery, like having it written, having auditory delivery. So my experience with online education goes all the way back to high school.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think very similarly, like I have some online education experiences with my own education, and it's been really interesting to like kind of see the evolution of how we were working at UF when we first started teaching. Online students were just kind of like, you have to like remember that they're there, right? So we would record lectures, and all of our real-time students would be there, and then we would publish those lectures, and then the online students would kind of watch them. And very independently, they'd be like, I have a question about this, or I have a question about this, but there was really no like interface between them and the rest of the students.
So good. So now that we've established where you were as 1.0, your digital origin story, so with the Bits and Bytes, our second segment, walk us through how you give feedback to your online students. Let's start with how you concept an assignment. Like, how do you take something that people have to do so technically? And I don't know, it just seemed like the arts where you have to visualize and be able to explain, and it's so human too, but then when you add the online component, like how can you maintain all of those characteristics?
For me, when it comes to feedback in the still image or in my animation classes, I will host maybe 3 or 4 Zoom calls a semester, and we will use the annotation features where they share their screen, and I talk over the work and I make the notes on the screen. I also really like to utilize like screen capture technology where you use either like a Zoom call or you use OBS Studio and screen capture. yourself talking and going through the work. I also really like to use a software called Sketch, and I know that you use the same one. And students upload their work to a platform, and you can frame by frame in the player and make notes in the player, and it will remember the notes from who is writing what. It's basically like a big Google Doc, but for time-based elements. So I like to utilize a lot of those digital tools to give feedback, and I also, for bigger projects, I like to split them up into sections. So there's a part 1, part 2, part 3. So that way, if there is a mistake or if there is a misinterpretation of the assignment halfway through or really early on, we can catch it before it gets to the point where you turn it in. When you're in a physical space, you can see those things happening directly in front of you, when you're working with your students every day. And online students don't have that ability. So splitting the projects up into chunks helps us kind of help them piece their projects together too.
I would say like a lot of the things that we do are kind of just the same way you do them in the industry. So it's like you come into work in the morning, you go to dailies, you get your review, and then you kind of like disappear into your own like little like animation, realm, and then you come back the next day and you get those updates. So with the online students especially, I think it's really great that when they are looking at the feedback, it's like directly in front of them, like it's on their screen. We can even take their notes and bring them into the software that they're using. Like you can download them, bring them into Maya, you could even bring them into Toon Boom if you wanted to. But I know that when I'm teaching students in class, like all of my notes and all of my review is like up on a big screen that's like maybe like 15 feet away from them. And so there's like this layer of disconnect. I feel like the reviews for the online students, at least in the animation sector, are very just kind of like intimate, where it's like really, really like one-on-one with their work and their things. I think the only detriment is, we have real like conversations with the in-class students about like acting and about like, you can see the moment that thing like resonates like on them. They're like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, and so we try to be very thorough with the online students when it comes to feedback, so that they can, if they watch everything, if they're like really in tune with all the material, they can, they can reach that same kind of enlightenment or that same, idea state. But yeah, I mean, thankfully technology has allowed us to really kind of give a parallel learning experience between the online and the real-time students. That's awesome. For sure.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
It is awesome. So do you all, when you give individual feedback, do you give individual feedback, or does it always have to be in a group, or how does that work?
I have a very specific structured feedback system because I have a lot of students sometimes in a section. And this is for online and on campus. I'll have my students broken up into groups, and I'll have a teaching assistant or a course assistant that'll help me. And I'll do group A one week and they'll do group B the next week, and we'll cycle them out so that they, no matter what, at the end of the semester get feedback from all three of us at some point. So that helps me manage the workload, right? But everybody will get feedback. Every single student will get feedback, especially in the animation, courses. It's incredibly important for us to be able to look at every single frame, every single pose, every joint, every, little finger on the character, because if they are not noticing the little tiny details that we're noticing, then they can't apply it into their next projects. And we also allow them to give peer feedback. So I'll have like a discussion in the online space, and they'll upload their work and they'll talk about each other's work, and I'll notice after a while they'll start using terms that we use together, and they'll start using notes that look very close to my handwriting, like they're paying attention, which is really cool to see. But yeah, I like to split them up into groups so it's not super overwhelming for them and for me. And the Sketch tools, this drawing on the screen, it really helps to get that very detailed feedback. I warned them all at the very beginning of the semester, like, I'm going to look at every single one of y'all's frames. I'm going to look at every single one. But it's good. It's really important in the end.
Yeah, I kind of rely on like really robust rubrics in my basic 3D class, because students will generally make the same mistakes. Right, so like we'll have like a walk cycle assignment, and so using the rubric, I'll kind of like pinpoint, okay, these are where you're making like mistakes, and as they move up into like the upper level animation courses, that's when it's like, okay, you know, we spend an entire class period, or like when I'm recording specifically for the online students, we'll spend like an entire like recording just looking at all of their work. I think my longest animation assignment is in my character animation class, and it's like 20 seconds of animation, which is like 500 individual pictures. And so like I'm spending like a good amount of time like just scrubbing through all of their work, giving them notes. And it's so cool to see them using like the tools that we use. Like I'll look at their reference footage of them acting, and it'll have like the Sync Sketch watermark on it because they've downloaded Sync Sketch. They've already made their own notes. And so I think by us providing that kind of robust feedback, it kind of gears them towards understanding that this is something that is part of being in the industry. There isn't this idea that, okay, once you graduate, this individualized feedback thing is over. It is going to be with them for as long as they are animators. Or even digital artists, there's always drawovers and things like that. So when we provide that kind of feedback, I always get students like, you know, between assignments being like, I'd like more feedback. Like they'll come to office hours and they'll be like, can you like do more drawovers? Can you like what else is, you know, it's almost like it's low key masochistic where it's just kind of like roast me.
Oh,
like,
exactly.
like,
the best students always come to office hours like, destroy me.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Destroy me, and I'm like,
awesome.
let's go, you know. But that's where you learn, you know, and that's when you start to separate yourself from your artwork as an extension of yourself, and you see all of yourself in it. And when you get feedback and all of yourself is in it, that's when it really hurts, you know. And that's when you're like, oh, that kind of stings a little bit. Feedback is really hard to take. But the more you remove yourself from it, the easier it is to take that feedback, apply that feedback, and make better work in the end. And it's just a process that we all have to learn to go through as artists, and especially as animators in the industry, where everything's moving really fast and we're in a pipeline and we have to do things by this specific style, the style book, right? So by us hammering in all of that feedback, it gets them into the habit of doing it for themselves and prepared for an actual industry standard environment where they're not going to be as nice as us. So they'll at least be prepared for that.
Right. So in your experience, what has been the hardest course for both of you to teach?
I think the most challenging class for me would be the digital portfolio class, because digital portfolio is not a specialization. It's not just animation. It's not just illustration and maybe even just games, right? And I'll have a collection of students that maybe I didn't get a lot of experience with directly because they're not focused in my specialty. And I have them all in one space and we all have different goals. So that class is one of my favorite classes at the same time, because I get to learn so much more about what their needs are, and I get to know them as people and individuals rather than just, I am a student, I'm trying to get through this process. But digital portfolio prepares you for your resume, your online presence, your ability to present yourself in a way for you to get a job or to even be in an interview situation. But that class is very challenging because it's a collection of a lot of different needs. So I have to be very flexible and I have to be very on top of my game. You know, I have to know everything in order to support them. So even if it's in a world that I'm not entirely knowledgeable in, like games, I have to do the extra research. I got to reach out to Mr. Heitzman. I got to reach out to Mr. Karlson. I got to talk to my crew to get their feedback on what the best way to support them would be as well. So that one's like a scavenger hunt every semester, and all the needs change every single time I teach it.
Oh, Heitzman.
I think for me, like the senior project course is the most difficult because there's very little like actual guidance or things that I'm like teaching them. It's a 16-week long test, right? And if we start noticing things like, oh, well, students aren't demonstrating knowledge in this area, that's really not going to affect the current class. It's something that we have to go back like, okay, 2 years before in their educational experience in all of these other classes. Like we have 5 undergraduate animation courses in 2D and 3D like combined. And so I'll look at students and, you know, when I look at their work and I see what they're doing, it's kind of like, you know, my call out or like my review of our animation program, and I'll like, you know, have an experience in class where it's like, okay, it looks like students don't know how to do basic shape breakdowns, or it looks like students don't know how to like do reference footage in this current cohort. And so we go back and like change like all of our courses. I'm doing that now with, I'm teaching senior project and my advanced 3D course. And throughout the semester, I'm gonna be looking at my students and basically being like, okay, what other areas do I need to support this learning environment that's going to affect the class of 2025? And so it's kind of stressful because a lot of students look for this kind of benchmark to benchmark, assignment to assignment, like stress and then like relief, and stress and then like, okay, the next assignment is a reset. The next assignment, I get a chance to do better. With senior project, you're spending 16 weeks making an entire film. And so it isn't over until it's over. Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think for me, the hardest part is just kind of like terraforming people's attitudes when they come into the class, because sometimes, you know, especially like in spring semester, they've already done fall semester, it's like, all right, cool, yeah, like we're gonna see what's gonna happen. I'm like, no, you need to be on it, like, you know, right
today.
now. Like, yeah, exactly. So I wouldn't say it's like difficult, but that is where all of my energy and all of my like, you know, time is kind of gravitated towards, is that specific class.
And would that be both for your in-person and online students, those same challenges?
Yeah, I think uniquely for the online students, it's one thing to stand in front of like a group of people and basically be like, you have to do this. This is like, everything is like riding on this, and they're just like, you know, wrapped with attention. And then, you know, there's a video that they can pause and they can kind of like disengage from it. So I find that checking in with them weekly and having them come to office hours and basically, you know, trying to remind them like, you know, I'm a real person, I exist, you know, like this is we're gonna have like a real temporal relationship. You're watching my videos, yeah, but like everything that you do is going to affect the present. It's going to affect the next week, so.
When you meet with them on Zoom, are they like, whoa, you're real?
Yeah. Sometimes we'll meet them in person eventually.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like they'll
yeah.
be at Convergence, and we've had a couple of interactions with online students where they come up to us like they've known us their whole lives. And I'm like, I'm sorry, who are you? Like, I feel like I recognize you, but maybe they're like, I'm so glad to finally meet you. And I feel the same way, you know, because they are a name on the screen. They're maybe someone who keeps their camera off in a Zoom call or something. So it's a really cool moment to be able to see this, you know, online student that has existed in this digital space that you've curated for them, and they're successful. And that's a really cool feeling. But yeah, that has happened a few times where I'll be out in the wild, you know, just existing in Gainesville, like, oh, hi, Miss Cantrell. And I'm like, huh? Who are you? But they're like, yeah, I've been in 3 of your online classes. And it's like, okay, that makes sense.
That's cool. All right, well, we're on our journey, our drive here. We're on our last segment, which is Tech Forward. So what do you think would better help your online art courses? What might the next evolution of art courses be like?
I want a hologram
Yes.
of me to appear on their table every day.
Like,
Yeah. I think maybe just some more immersion.
That'd be pretty cool, actually.
And I would like to have some more time for that immersion as well. Like, if I could spend some space, like just separate and just focus on the online classes to maybe have some more meetings, and of course, be flexible for everybody's schedules. That's like a whole separate thing. Of course, if I could bend time and space, that would also be really cool. But
clone yourself.
but I think just more hands-on Zoom calls, those kinds of things, that really, really helps. I think just the interactions with the students really make the class, because then the instructor gets to be in a position to, you know, make adjustments or add additional information that would be supplemental to somebody's specific interests. Because of course I like to tell my students in the beginning of the semester that I want them to make this class something that they want it to be as well, to try to, you know, milk the resources as much as they can. But that's basically it. Just I want more time to hang out with them, you know? Yeah, just a hologram, please.
That's all.
I think the biggest thing that students in the online sphere like need is not not just more access to me, but more access to each other. Like I remember being an undergrad and like working with a bunch of people outside of class time, and we'd all be on our computers and we'd like look around, we'd see other people's work and be like, oh, so-and-so's doing this really cool thing here. We'd all gravitate towards them. And there's this really like competitive environment, especially in like the digital arts sphere, where it's like, you want to do really well, not just because, you know, it's affecting your life, but you also want to like, you know, have that moment where everyone's impressed with your work. And it's this kind of like really great structure of everyone pushing each other to be their best through this kind of like friendly competition. So there's some new technology out that I know that Darius Brown, one of our associates, is kind of working on, where students will be able to practice lighting in Unreal Engine, where they're going to actually move around these lights, and that will kind of affect like a real world space.
Sure.
And so that, you know, it's really hard, especially for those courses, if you're taking like filmmaking online or anything where you don't have access to the equipment. Luckily for us, animation is like a digital environment, like 100%. So like there's nothing really that they're missing out on. But it would be really cool if we develop the technology to just kind of have like a VR like work session where you are like, you know, you got the helmet on, you got maybe like 8 other people around you from all around the country, and you're just working on your virtual machines, and you can see their screens and things like that. And you can have like real world conversations with people. I think it really does impact them. I feel like as a student, I never want to feel like it's just me and the content. I want to feel like it's me and then my friends or these other people who are all kind of going through it together. So I think the kind of like the unspoken hero of the digital world's education experience has been how every student creates like these digital networks on their own. They form Discord groups, they form clubs, they form all of these things where it's like, no, you're I think it's almost kind of like they get strong-armed into it a little bit. They're like, no, you're gonna be part of like this Discord group. I
was gonna bring that up too, is like, when I was in my master's program, I wish I did more group chat stuff. I know that, you know, when I was in, I guess like Facebook groups were like what my generation did, but I love and admire that all of our students, and like as an instinct, they're like, Discord channel, everybody get in the Discord channel, and they build their community for themselves. And if you're not a Discord user and you're an online student, I highly encourage you to use that space and to utilize that and build a community with your cohort, because that's a space that you can curate for yourselves that, you know, can be like a classroom space that, you know, you might be missing from an online experience. And Discord's really great because you can do voice channels, you can do video calls, you can, you know, hang out with your classmates in the space. So yeah, I love how much that the digital world students use Discord.
For our listeners or watchers who are not familiar with Discord, can you explain what that's like?
Yeah, it's basically like a Slack channel. It's like a group chat. It's a space where you can have a select group of people with a shared interest and just have different channels for different kinds of discussions.
Cool.
So it's like Slack, if you've ever used Slack, or it's like Teams, but it's not like a work official kind of platform. It's more geared towards video games and hanging out with your online friends, but our students have found a way to use that space for class group chats as well. Yeah.
I think in some ways it's more natural than they're in person.
Yeah.
You know, because like I'll have a class and it'll be no one's talking and they're all so quiet. And then they'll just be like, oh yeah, on the Discord the other day, you were so funny. I'm like, I've never heard your voice, you know? So it's a space that they're comfortable in. And I think like if you're gonna have a learning experience, like comfortability is a huge, huge like part of just starting that, you know? So.
Okay, no, that's very helpful and enlightening, especially since I think many people haven't heard about Discord and creating that space for students. Now, since you all are here and you're animators, we want to know which animation is like your favorite, like whether it be like cartoon, TV, movie. Sorry, I didn't prep you all for this one, so fine. Now it's okay. Gonna be authentic.
Well, I will have to say that what really got me started in falling in love with the medium was Bambi. When I saw Bambi for the first time, that was the first experience I had with the behind the scenes. And, you know, of course, I'm from the 90s, so I was rewinding and, you know, going to like the extra stuff at the end of the VHS and watching how animators studied drops of water by using bowls of milk, which I incorporated into one of my classes in a really goofy way, where I was recording with Yulia and I wore a little lab coat and I punched a bowl of milk.
I remember that.
Cut
like,
to
milk?
Miss Cantrell punching, you know. But it was kind of like a nod to that experience from when I was a kid, and also something that actually was a part of the process.
Right.
So it was really cool to see. And then the reason they used milk, they explained, was because water is translucent. You can't study the way it moves unless it's like a solid shape, but it also has to be liquid. So it was an awesome experience for the animators to study the droplets so that they could mimic it when the rainstorm happens in the movie. And I thought that was so cool. You know, I'm like 5 years old, like, whoa, milk is rain, and rain is great. My mom's like, you're 5 years old. What are you talking about?
I gotta animate this, Mom.
And I completely fell in love with it. I guess my favorite animated show, it's creepy. People always say it's creepy, but I loved Courage the Cowardly Dog. Courage the Cowardly Dog was a show that some kids were not allowed to watch because it was too scary. It was like a horror kind of show. It was just this little old couple living in a house in the middle of nowhere, and their dog is constantly like fighting off like these evil things happening in this like spooky space. So he's just always anxious, always freaking out. Everyone's always screaming in the show. But it had such a cool concept, and every episode was a completely different story in itself. And it had really cool compositing where I'd never seen, you know, actual photography placed in the show as textured layers, and they started integrating 3D characters at this time. And it was just a cool thing to watch and continue to be inspired by. It was just always reinventing itself. And that's neck and neck with Samurai Jack. I like Samurai Jack.
Yeah, I think for me, like animators will always go to the film or TV show that inspired them to become animators. And the first movie my parents ever took me to see in theaters was Aladdin, the only Aladdin ever made. There is no live action. And I remember we were late, and like that has just kind of formulated in me this idea of just like, you can't be late for the movies. And so ever since then I was like, I want to do this. Like this is like a magical experience. And then also I love The Great Mouse Detective from the 80s. Like that is that's kind of like my hipster, like, oh, you probably haven't even heard of it, but I love that movie. It's so great.
80s kid. My first movie that I ever saw in the theaters was Care Bears the movie.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, so a special part of my heart for animation, and I'm sure it wasn't super hard to draw those Care Bears, but you had to come up with all the different Care Bears.
That's cute.
I know.
Really cute.
Yeah, 5-year-old field trip, kindergarten. Thanks, kindergarten teacher. But anyways, to take care of your time, thank you.
Of course.
Chelsea, thank you, Aaron, for joining.
Yeah.
Thank you to those listening and watching. Until next time.